Carpool is proudly presented by Classic Cover Prestige. Exceptional cover for exceptional vehicles. Hello and welcome to Carpool. Every week we'll be sharing the latest and greatest vehicles on the market today. In this week's show, the Cullinan, quite literally the Rolls-Royce of SUVs. Mid-engine magic from Porsche's new 718 Cayman. But first, we're touring in the new Bentley Continental GT. Ah, Bentley. Stately cars for stately driveways. As English as Michael Caine in a Savile Row suit. They certainly don't make them like that anymore, do they? Well, actually, they kind of do. In fact, that's a brand new car. That's the new Bentley Continental GT, powered by a 6-litre W12 engine. It's a marriage of old and new. It's an incredibly high-tech car, but it's made in a very traditional sort of way. You won't find another car that's put together quite like this one. Back in 2010, there wasn't really a sporting Bentley in the range. In fact, there hadn't been one for some time. The GT completely changed that. The Bentley might look like a classic GT, however, it's anything but. It's a striking amalgamation of technology and tradition. So what do I mean by a mix of tradition and technology? Well, it's not until you get in here in the cabin of the car that you realise just what a traditional kind of Bentley feel the Continental GT still has. In fact, this steering wheel, the stitch marks are measured by a guy, and I'm not joking, a guy with a kitchen fork that his grandfather used to measure the stitching in the steering wheel. That's how traditional it gets, but then you hear that there's actually more lines of code in the software systems in the Bentley Continental GT than there is in a Boeing 787 Dreamliner. So it is quite a strange car in that it is so traditional to sit in, but there's so much going on below the surface. There's plenty of technology on board, but there's also plenty of power. A 467 kilowatt, 6-litre W12 sits under the bonnet. W12, think 2 V6s welded together. 467 kilowatts of peak power and a massive 900 newton meters of torque. Now, that's the kind of newtons you would have got in a truck about 10 years ago. Not now. This thing really pulls. If you're expecting this Bentley to have a ferocious growl, you're going to have to push pretty hard to hear it. It's a very fast car, yes, but it doesn't have that shouty soundtrack. I mean, it's a sports car, sir, but there's no need to be uncouth. Despite its elegant manners, the Continental GT will still rocket from 0 to 100 kilometres per hour in just 3.8 seconds. There's a massive 900 newton meters of torque available from this engine too, so power delivery is endlessly rich, regardless of where you are in the rev range. The car feels really suited to New Zealand driving conditions. It's generally a rear-wheel drive vehicle, but if the road surface turns marginal, it'll give you all-wheel drive ability. It's good at stopping as well. In fact, it has the biggest iron brake assemblies of any car manufactured in the world today. 420mm discs up front, 380mm discs at the back. No fancy ceramic brake package? Well, Bentley reckon that when your engineering is this good and consistent, you don't need it. Although you do get the feeling they're holding something back for the inevitable super sport version of the GT. Despite selling more vehicles than they ever have before, bespoke is still the byword at Bentley. You can have your Bentley Continental GT as over-the-top or as understated as you like. You could have a very subtle and conservative interior like this vehicle, or you could have purple seats and a yellow dashboard. There's around 10 square metres of sustainably sourced wood veneer in every single car. As for the interior, there's an incredible 2.98 kilometres worth of stitching thread used. It's all done by hand, and the quilting in the seats alone accounts for over 300,000 individual stitches. This is as close to hand-built bespoke as it's possible to get, while still fulfilling an increasingly large order book on a global scale. Despite the bespoke air, though, there's plenty of innovation inside the GT's cabin. The rotating display at the centre of the car's dashboard elegantly turns through 3 different face settings. It took 2 years to develop, features 40 different moving parts and 2 motors. The new electronic dashboard appears to be analogue. In fact, the clarity is so great that you'd be forgiven for thinking you're looking at mechanical dials. It's a car that works as a grand tourer for the open road, but also as a slice of luxury for the everyday. I know you're thinking, okay, it's not really a supercar. There's no massive wings on it or big flared arches. The doors just open normally. They don't even open up in the air or anything like that. But this is actually Bentley's very successful take on a supercar. It's fast, it's exclusive, it's dynamic on the road. But of course, it's like a bit of a gentleman's cruiser if you want it to be as well. You could be stuck in traffic and it's still a lovely spot to be. At the end of the day, nobody makes cars like Bentley, and that sounds like marketing hyperbole. It's not. These cars are put together with so much care and attention. It's incredibly bespoke if you want it to be, but it's also incredibly practical and usable as well. There really is nothing like a Bentley, and when it comes to Bentleys, there's nothing like a Continental GT. Carpool is proudly presented by Classic Cover Prestige. Exceptional cover for exceptional vehicles. No, your eyes aren't deceiving you. What we have here appears to be an SUV with a Rolls-Royce mascot on the grille. The Cullinan is the name of the world's largest and most flawless diamond ever discovered. It's a pretty apt name for Rolls-Royce's brand new SUV. And being a Rolls-Royce, the Cullinan is designed to shine brighter than anything else on the market. This is also the practical face of Rolls-Royce in the 21st century. Whereas in the past, the luxury manufacturer would have simply listed available power from the Cullinan's 6.75 litre V12 as adequate, these days they're much more upfront. Then again, when your engine boasts 420 kilowatts of power and 850 newton meters of torque, you'll probably want to shout about it. Or do you? Rolls-Royces don't really shout after all. There's the old adage that the Rolls-Royce should be so quiet you can hear the clock tick. Actually, that's quite true. There's a V12 under this bonnet, but even at speed, you'd never know it was there. To say a Rolls-Royce is quiet is probably stating the obvious, but it's not actually until you drive this vehicle that you realise just how quiet it is. Like any Rolls-Royce, this one cuts an imposing figure, but unlike the Wraith or Phantom, the Cullinan is all about height rather than length. In fact, before Rolls-Royce conceded that, okay, yes, this is an SUV, they insisted on calling it a high-riding vehicle. And they drew from their lengthy history to back up this strange phrase as well. High-riding Rolls-Royces were the stuff of British India, where you would see Maharajas off out game shooting. Which brings me to another thing about the Cullinan. Yes, it can go off-road. Hit the switch the manufacturer dubs the everywhere button, and the Rolls-Royce will take you through gravel, snow, mud, basically anywhere where you can take a Range Rover. Or make that 2 Range Rovers, given the entry price of the Cullinan. Now, there is actually a base specification for the Cullinan, but chances are you'll never find it. In fact, in this rarefied world of bespoke customisation, it's pretty fair to say that no 2 vehicles will be the same. The options really are endless. There are 16 standard colours, but for a fee, your options extend to basically every colour in the rainbow. The base Cullinan will cost you around $519,000, but in this example, there are over $200,000 worth of options ticked. That's another sports car in itself. This car features a launch package which contains luxuries like lamb's wool floor mats, monogrammed headrests, electronic side curtains, and a rear theatre configuration which sees 2 large massaging chairs bisected by a cool box and champagne flutes. For a little bit of added practicality, you can even option your Cullinan with 7 seats. Not in a conventional sense, but if you tick the right options box, 2 extra seats will be added to the boot. These can allow you to sit back, relax, and enjoy the polo. That practicality extends to the Cullinan's abilities off-road. Rolls-Royce like to say that this vehicle was tested to destruction in a variety of harsh environments, including icy tundra and scorching deserts. This is a full-time four-wheel drive with a 540mm wading depth. Of course, you might want to watch out for those 22-inch polished alloy wheels on any rocks during your next river crossing. The Land Rover analogy is actually a pretty good one. In fact, the Cullinan has very similar approach and departure angles to the Discovery, which is still one of the best four-wheel drive vehicles around. So clearly no back road is going to prove bothersome for this particular vehicle. Of course, for your average Rolls-Royce Cullinan owner, off-road is something that happens to other people. Even on the highway, the Cullinan has its owner's comfort in mind. It has what's called a flag bearer camera system. This scans the road ahead, continually looking for potholes and bumps, and then it adjusts the suspension to soak them up. Other hidden tech reminds you that while the Rolls-Royce badge still conjures up images of a stately bygone era, this is a thoroughly modern vehicle. There are driver assistance systems galore in this car, including rear cross traffic alert warnings, lane departure warnings, and a pedestrian warning as well, as if any pedestrian won't be aware of you in the Cullinan. So it's a big, capable SUV that does a lot of things very well. But is it actually too big? Is it actually a daily driver? It's very practical, but it's still a Rolls-Royce. It's a large car with a large price tag. You'd think it might actually be a sales disaster. You'd be wrong. Remarkably, or perhaps not unsurprisingly, the Cullinan, which is a car that can be specified up into a 7-digit price tag, is in hot demand. Rolls-Royce can't build them fast enough. In fact, they've just taken on 200 extra production people at their Goodwood facility in the UK. In our part of the world, if you have the wherewithal and you want to buy one, you're probably going to have to wait till the end of the year. But you know what they say, good things take time, and when it does arrive, you have absolutely the Rolls-Royce of SUVs. Carpool is proudly presented by Classic Cover Prestige. Exceptional cover for exceptional vehicles. If it's a Porsche, it's going to have a 3-digit nameplate. And while the 911 might remain the headline act, the 718 has become a story in its own right. The 718 nameplate hasn't been conjured up by the marketing team. In fact, it has a lot of history attached to it. It refers back to the 718 GTR of 1962. In fact, Porsche's lineage of mid-engine race cars have a pedigree all their own. Porsche has re-engineered this 718 Cayman and its Boxster sibling to present much more of an aggressive streak. The changes are subtle at first, but actually the difference is like night and day. Suffice to say, this car is very different to what's gone before. In fact, with this generation Cayman, only the bonnet, windscreen and roof remain from the previous car. Looks like the car's ready to pounce. These large air intakes are designed to gulp in air as you fly along at speed. And it's fair to say that the Boxster, which traditionally hasn't been an aggressively styled car, is very much in the same mould as this one. This is the entry-level Porsche Cayman. Now, of course, entry-level is a bit of a relative term. You're still talking about a $123,900 sports car here, but actually that's relatively good buying to get yourself into a fully fledged Porsche sports car. Porsche was essentially the first car company in this sphere to realise that if you want to put more tech and more performance in your sports cars, you need mass market oomph. And that's what they did with the Cayenne. They were the first car company to produce an SUV. And the same formula follows with the Cayman and Boxster. These cars aren't priced to be exclusive, they're priced to be enjoyed by everybody. You could easily spend a similar amount of money on a nondescript executive sedan. Of course, with a sports car like this, adding a few optional extras is a simple process too. Which is what you see here. Somebody's been pretty liberal with the biro. You've got things such as the Carrera S 20-inch alloys. There's a keyless entry system called Entry Drive. Tick a few options and you're going to get a car that's a bit more than the 123,900 that it starts at. The good news though is that the rear wiper blade and the storage net in the passenger footwell are no cost options. Power comes courtesy of a brand new flat 4 turbo. In the Cayman, that gives you 220 kilowatts peak power. In the Cayman S, 257 kilowatts. For purists, you can still option in a manual transmission, or you can have a PDK 7-speed automatic gearbox. But of course, you won't be able to see the engine of your 718 Cayman unless you have a Porsche service technician badge on your shirt. That's right, it's effectively a sealed unit, and looking for the bonnet release lever in this particular car is a fruitless task. There's that visceral feeling in the 718 Cayman of having the engine right there behind your head. At lower speeds, there's a lovely mechanical sound. Push a bit harder, it turns into a growl. It's all business up front too, with a 0 to 100 km/h time of 4.7 seconds for the entry-level Cayman or 4.2 seconds for the Cayman S. Top speed at your friendly local racetrack, 275 km/h. The new chassis offers much more dynamic cornering abilities and lateral stability. The end result, the Cayman feels like it's hugging the ground regardless of the speed. Porsche looked to their heritage when designing this car, both in the external side of things and in here, and they looked to the 550 coupe for this car, and replicated in the way you sit low down in the car. You've got a very sort of upright steering wheel. It's a classic sports car sort of setup. You've got 3 dials in the instrument binnacle ahead of you, and at the centre of things is this Porsche Communication Management System, or PCM. The 911, which was just unveiled recently at the Los Angeles Motor Show, it moved a lot of these buttons up into the actual screen itself, but for this generation of Cayman, you've still got this kind of setup, but it actually works really well. Everything falls to hand really nicely. Obviously, we've got a PDK automatic gear shift in this particular car, but if you had a manual box, everything's right there at your fingertips. This communication infotainment system takes care of everything like your phone, your satellite navigation. It even has Apple CarPlay as well. Thanks to a retuned chassis, the driver's seat is an engaging and dynamic place to sit. So this Cayman has what's called the Porsche Active Suspension Management System in it, PASM for short. Hit that, and it puts the car into a sports setting which lowers the suspension by 10 mil, and that obviously gives you a lower centre of gravity. You know, this car is obviously very low already. If you go for the Cayman S, you can actually option in another degree of sports suspension, which actually gives you 20 millimetres lower ride height. The electromechanical steering system in the Cayman has been lifted directly from the 911 Turbo. The 911 bloodline runs through this car in other ways as well. The Cayman S features brakes taken from a 911 Carrera, while this car takes its brakes from the Cayman S. The end result, everyone has bigger brakes. So, a very different type of Porsche from what we've seen of this model in the past. But where does the personality switch put the Cayman and Boxster in Porsche's current stable of sports cars? More and more people are starting to wake up to the idea of the 718 Cayman as a true driver's car with the dynamic abilities of its big brother, the 911. And don't forget, of course, if you wanted to step up to a 911, you'd have to change the 1 at the start of the Cayman's recommended retail price into a 2. The Cayman has become a real driver's car. It really has. It's got that low centre of gravity and that much more equal weight distribution as well. Again, with the aggressive looks on the exterior, the sports seating and the sports setup inside the cabin, you've got a car that is very much a driver's car and very much in the manner of Porsche driver's cars, mid-mounted engine driver's cars of old. Yes, the 911 is still the icon, it's still the one, but the Cayman has become its own thing. The legacy is already forming, and with all these significant enhancements, the number 718 now has a cachet all its own. Carpool was proudly presented by Classic Cover Prestige. Exceptional cover for exceptional vehicles. In next week's show, Aston Martin roars in with a brand new Vantage. BMW's X5 might just about be the smartest SUV on the planet. And it's Lamborghini first, SUV second, with the 478 kilowatt Urus.